Hi, in this video I will be presenting Kahneman's distinction between System 1 and System 2 thinking. So, System 1 is a kind of thinking that operates automatically and quickly with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. It's looking at this picture and immediately realizing that there is some kind of negative emotion she's portraying, being angry, or she seems to be yelling. We don't need to look at the picture or think about the position of the mouth and how open it is and what do the eyes actually look like and how about the eyebrows. It's immediate and it's automatic, it's quick, and there is not really an effort going on. Same with 2 plus 2, that equals 4. People with sort of a regular Danish education don't need to stop and think about this equation. We can look at the numbers here and say it says 12, 13, 14. Again, it's easy, it's automatic, and it would even be difficult not to sort of read it or be able to figure out that this 2 plus 2 is 4. I can say the words pink elephant, and it's difficult not to think of them as of a pink elephant. It's difficult not to sort of engage in this quick System 1 thinking. In contrast, if we have to do a slightly more complicated piece of math, it becomes more difficult. It's not that we can't do it. 10 times 24 is 240, 7 times 24 is 168, and then we can add these two numbers. But as you can see, I really had to focus and concentrate on that. System 2 thinking is a kind of thinking that requires an allocation of attention. It's an effortful mental activity, for instance, some kind of complex computation. It doesn't have to be math. It can be any other kind of more complicated thing. And System 2 operations are then often associated with sort of the feeling of agency and choice. You have to decide to try to figure out what 17 times 24 is. It's not like the 2 plus 2 is 4. You have to actively engage in that kind of thinking. You have to concentrate. You might even sort of experience if you are walking with someone and then suddenly a difficult question is being asked, the other person might even stop walking in order to think about the question. It requires such intense concentration that we sort of end up stopping doing anything else. So Kahneman's very fundamental point is here that this is both of these systems, that the kinds of operations they illustrate and portray are cognitive processes. This is something that happens in our brain. It is a kind of thinking, but they're fundamentally different. And one is automatic and quick, and the other one requires an active engagement. It requires concentration. And can also be exhaustive. You can get tired of having to concentrate for too long. So this is, again, just to sort of provide an overview of what we could call the turtle versus a rabbit kind of thinking. And there are a bunch of examples here on page 21 to 22 on what the System 1 kind of thinking can be. Being able to hear where a sound is coming from, detecting whether someone is hostile, understanding simple sentences, looking out into the horizon and seeing that one object is more distant than the other. It's quick, it's effortless, it's automatic, it's almost difficult not to do it. In contrast, if there is a noisy room and we have to sort of find out who's actually talking right now, and we really have to concentrate and we have to pay attention to it. If you hear a surprising sound that you're not really sure you're familiar with, then you really have to search your memory. Again, you have to engage in effortful process of a mental activity. If you're reading a difficult text or sort of considering whether someone's argument is really sound and valid, well, again, you have to engage in this System 2 kind of thinking. And again, there are further examples on page 21 to page 22. So System 1 can also then be characterized as gullible, because we can very quickly this is where we jump to conclusion, while System 2 is then in charge of being doubtful and not necessarily trusting what we hear. But System 2 is lazy and then often busy, and because it requires this attention and effortful activity, then we don't always engage System 2 when we should. And again, that's really a key point that I'll be trying to drive home a couple of times in this lesson. That System 1 is what leads us to have biases, for instance, confirmation biases, and jumping to conclusions that maybe we shouldn't jump to. It's our individual responsibility to engage system 2, to stop and to think about what we are being faced with. But it requires an effort and attention. Of course, we can then sort of consider, now I use the examples 2 plus 2 and 17 times 24. I mean, where do we sort of draw the line? When does it move from system 1 to system 2? And there was no clear cutoff, and it certainly depends on how much experience one has with math. And I'm sure there are people that can do 17 times 24 immediately because they've just done so much math in their life. So just think of these as sort of principles and illustrative examples of two different kinds of thinking processes. And they're not two completely different separate systems in our mind. It's probably a continuum between system 1 and system 2, but they still represent different kind of cognition and different kinds of thinking. And we'll get many more examples and implications of this in the following. Another example that can illustrate how engaging in system 2 thinking can be effortful is by doing what we can call the Stroop test. You can even Google this and then you can find sort of various tests we can try to engage in it. But it's basically looking at words and colors like these and then having to say the color, not read the word red, but say the color that is underneath it. This is then red and white and green and brown, so that's quite easy. But when we then have to read this one as red and this one as white and this one as red and this one as green and white, brown, it actually requires an effort. And try to find one of these tests online and do this for a minute or two in a row, it becomes really cognitively demanding and very, very difficult to continue to engage in, even though the task in itself is extremely easy. It's just about looking at the color of a word and saying that, color. But that's, again, just to illustrate that even fairly simple tasks can become sort of cognitively demanding. So the difference between system 1 and system 2 is not per se easy versus difficult, but it is effortful versus effortless. It is quick versus slow. That's why the book is called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. But the point here is also that system 1 is sort of eager to just jump to a conclusion of saying reading white and green and red, etc., even though that's not what we're supposed to read. So system 1 is always ready just to jump to whatever conclusion that it sort of immediately springs to our mind. And sort of a little bit of a complicated setup is trying to illustrate this point, where this is an experimental setup where someone has put out a bunch of these moving dots. And again, it's an experiment. Imagine two different groups, and they sort of see all these moving dots in two rounds. In the first round, they have to figure out whether the dots generally move to the left or to the right, and then they have to make a decision on that. And in the second round, these dots are again all moving to the left or to the right. And as highlighted in the bullet points here to the left, what happens is that if you in the first round saw the dots move to the left, you're much quicker to be able to identify that they in the second round also move to the left. So the task in itself is of course meaningless in many ways, but it's an effective task to figure out that our brain is very eager and quick to jump to a conclusion that it sort of already jumped to before. And the point then is that we might sort of be able to extrapolate that to real life cognitive processes as well. So people's interpretation of new evidence is often biased by the previous choice, as highlighted here in the first bullet point. If we've seen something before, we are much more eager to sort of see that same thing again in the second round. System 1 makes us ready to process certain information. So again, just an overview that highlights the different characteristics of System 1 and System 2. System 1, it's unconscious, it's effortless, it's automatic, there's no self-awareness. What you see is all there is. And the role of System 1 is then to deliver updates, assess the situation, and just sort of continuously informing us as individuals what's going on right now. System 2 is then the slow thinking. It requires a conscious, deliberate effort, and it requires us to decide to engage in a thinking effort. It's the part of us that is logical and skeptical and might say, let's try to search for more information. I'm not really sure about this. It is also the one that then is supposed to make decisions. again, these are sort of simplified distinctions, and are not sort of two different places in the brain. It's not the left side or the right or the front or the back side, but it's sort of characterizations of that our brain is not just one thing. We actually engage in two different kinds of thinking. There are two different kinds of thinking processes going on in our mind. And system one can end up filtering what we get. Let's watch this short video that makes this illustration. It's sort of a typical whodunit, who's responsible video. Let's just watch this for about a minute or minute and a half.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Action.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Well, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
So, a sort of a simple, fun example that illustrates that we might think that we see the world and that we process the information that is being put before us. But it's often just system one that is engaging in sort of effortless thinking and focusing on sort of whatever is at interest here. And the main question was who actually did it, who did the murder. And it's system one filter. So system two processes sort of the logical part of the brain, can only sort of deal with information that is actually being presented to system two. And the point is here then also that we might think that we have all information in front of us, but since system one sort of is the effortless filtering that filters whatever information is coming from the outside and what system two can even work with when it's trying to figure out who actually did it, well, that leads to a problematic situation, and we have to realize that we haven't necessarily seen everything that is going on. So we have this top-down filtering that the former video illustrated, and these examples also illustrate. As you can clearly see on the left, it says A, B, C, and here it says 12, 13, 14, but notice that the B and the 13 are completely identical. But our brain is very eager and quick to just neglect the ambiguity here and say A, B, C and 12, 13, 14, because we have this top-down filtering going on. System one is just processing the information. It's not really thinking about what's going on here. It's just saying, oh, look, here's an A, here's a C, that's probably a B in the middle. And then the next example is also quite fascinating when we look at this picture. It's a black and white picture is only the lines that are colored. So everything sort of within these boxes here is not colored. But our brain is just eager to sort of add more information to whatever we're seeing. So we're seeing the picture in color, unless you're colorblind, of course. So so our brain is not really capable of sort of making these distinctions that it's only the lines that are colored and the rest is black and white. So our brain is quite literally a prediction machine. That's also what happened in the video before, in the Whodunnit video. Our brain is filtering and helping us sort of expect what to see, which then also means that we don't sort of see everything that is put before our eyes quite literally. This is also illustrated in this visualization. So if you sort of reach out your arm and look at the size of your thumb, that's really the extent of the very high quality information you're getting in visually. That's also what these pictures below here is then illustrating. That imagine you're standing here in Santorini, Greece, and you're looking out over this village. You're actually only getting really high quality information from small extracts of it. It's not that you don't see the rest, but it's sort of not high quality information you're getting in. And the reason why you sort of can see this whole picture is in part because your eyes can move around, but also that you have sort of a background image that your brain can pull up. If you've seen this image once, then you sort of can pull that up from your memory banks. I usually, when I teach this in a classroom, I usually use the example that when I walk down the stairs in the auditorium, well, then I've walked down the same stairs many times, and I've seen a classroom many times. I hardly have to look out into it because my brain is already ready to pull out the image sort of to use as a frame when I engage with the classroom. So if something was completely unusual in the classroom, I might not even notice it, even though my eyes is sort of looking out into the room, because there is this top-down filtering going on. This is also what you can see if you do eye tracking, and the heat map is then illustrating what people are actually looking at, and they're not looking at all the things on the picture here. Some things they are sort of really paying attention to, others they are not. So again, it doesn't mean that I don't sort of it's only the width of my thumb that is providing me any kind of information, but that's where I get my high quality information, and the rest is really driven by what I'm paying attention to. So if I jump back to the video, this is then also why we didn't notice all these 21 changes, even though they were happening within sort of the in our vision, and we could see the entire screen, but our brain was simply not able to pick up all the different elements that was going on. We didn't notice it because System 1 was just processing the information, and System wasn't realizing that you should look at the picture in the background or all the different sort of elements that were being changed, the flowers, etc., or the person lying down here and the thing that was lying there. We have a top-down filtering going on. Our brain is quite literally prediction machines, and this is also why when we look at chess players, experts versus novices, that they see different things. So good chess players, they sort of see more chess pieces at once. They see larger chunks, familiar or meaningful constellations of all these different chess pieces, which enables them to sort of more rapidly recognize patterns. So when a novice or an expert look at a chessboard and have to tell what's going on, they don't sort of form the same kind of perceptions or the same kind of chunks of what's going on. They're creating different kinds of pictures because their systems have been trained differently, so to speak. Another example of this is that imagine, or not just imagine, this was a study where 100 radiologists were seeing this picture in order to find out whether there was actually, this was from a person who had cancer, and they were apparently especially paying attention to all these white different things. What happened was that 83 of these radiologists apparently did not notice the gorilla in the picture, which I'm sure many of you noticed because you don't really know what you're looking for. But the point here is that what we're thinking about, what we're focused on, quite aggressively filters the world around us and shapes what we see. And that's the effortless, unconscious sort of System 1 filtering of the world that is going on. And this is what we have to pay attention to, that we are sort of exposed to these kinds of visual and cognitive illusions in the world around us. And if we're not aware of this, then System 2 is working with sort of a biased version of the actual world because they're not getting all the information in that we should. So this was an attempt to provide a definition of what System 1 and System 2 is. Here you sort of have an overview of a bunch of different relevant concepts here. I won't go through the details of it. You can look at it yourself, either on this picture or go to the link. But the main aim was to sort of provide an sort of initial insight into this thinking fast and thinking slow. So I've sort of covered elements from this top left corner here and this top right corner, that two different kinds of thinking processes. They're fast and they're slow, and it means that System 2 is difficult to engage, and it's System 1 that filters whatever we see in the world and then also makes us miss all the different changes in the Whodunnit videos. It makes us miss the gorilla. It makes us think that a picture is colored, because our brain is this prediction machine, and it's very sort of effective and efficient for us, and it works for us, that we don't always have to engage in system 2. Imagine that we had to do this all the time. Every time someone says something, and we have to figure out whether they're being nice or happy or hostile. Imagine that we had to spend like 3-4 seconds of really intent thinking about what is it going on right here. It would make life really cumbersome and problematic. So it's good that we have this efficient system. I'll talk more about that in the live section of this lesson. But it is a point about our thinking, and this is what Kahneman is then also saying, that we might be irrational and sort of pick the wrong answer in the pension scheme example from video 1 here today, because it's system 1 that is being engaged in a thinking process, because we haven't stopped and let system 2 sort of take over.